Let's take a little twirl around the rink with a morning skate edition of the Inside Edge. Here are your hosts, Bob McElligott and Jody Shelley.
Welcome to the Air Canada Centre today as the Blue Jackets get set to take on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Bob McElligott and Jody Shelley. We're going to bring Jeff Rimmer in on this one, too, because this is one of his 7 hometowns that he has all across North America. See, I'm just starting it off with the salvo on him right away, Jody.
Yeah, I like it. But we're not going to bring him in too quick. Let's let him sit there a little bit.
That's a good idea. Blue Jackets come into this game fresh off a win on Saturday afternoon against the Florida Panthers. That game, when you look at the final score, 6-3, it looks like the Blue Jackets were totally in command of that game. And for parts of it, indeed they were. But it was a lot closer game than 6-3.
Well, it's interesting. I thought the Jackets came out. I love how they started that energy line with McKenzie, Letestu, and Calvert. I thought they really set the tempo of the game. And from there, the first period, they dictated. But towards the end of the first period, they let the Florida Panthers hang around. And they some bad turnovers. Some kind of lackadaisical play crept into their game, which is fine. They got the win. Correct those mistakes. I thought they did a great job correcting the power play. I mean, they started scoring on the first 3. So now there's things to work on again. These games within the game, if you will. If you get your wins, nice. You're still going to go out and correct those things. I think that the first 2 games, there's been a lot of holes. Lost the first one in New Jersey after the break. Won the other night against the Panthers. And here you're in Toronto, the hotbed of hockey. Toronto's lost the first 2 games in overtime just past the break. It's going to be a bit of a bee's nest in here for these guys, but it sets up perfect here for the Jackets.
Yeah, and the game on Saturday for the Blue Jackets, that's one that on paper you got to win. And especially after you lose in New Jersey, you've got to win. They survived that pressure. They got the win. Now they come in here, like you said, and they're coming in here to take on a team that holds one of the wild card spots right now, and a team that the Blue Jackets beat up very badly back in November when they came in here at the end of that Canadian road swing, that 4-game road trip back in November around Thanksgiving. So I'm sure the Maple Leafs remember that quite well.
Was that this year? That seems like a long
believe it or not.
Oh, wow. What a season. Yeah, I'm sure they remember it better than we do. And it's, those things you definitely, it's one of the things Randy Carlyle, there's got to be ways to motivate his group, and I'm sure that there's a lot of videos showing the structure of the Blue Jackets and how they can play.
You look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, the guy that jumps off the page is a guy that was a former teammate of yours, and that is James Van Riemsdyk. He just came back from playing for Team USA in the Olympics, 26 goals, 26 assists. He's been a nice addition ever since he's come over from Philadelphia to this team.
You know what? I'm a big fan of his just because I got to know him as a young guy in Philly. He's a big guy. He's only getting bigger. He's now 215. I weighed him last night. I'm just kidding.
You always carry that pocket scale. I always wonder why you have that pocket scale with you.
He's getting bigger. He's a guy that's still growing. He's a young guy, and he's figuring his way around the league. He's having success. I spoke to him about his experience in Sochi, and he's extremely disappointed because they had a very good team. They felt like they let the ball slip there. But just an overall good experience, and he's a big part of this Toronto Maple Leafs team.
Another guy that's a big part of it was his teammate in Sochi as well, and that's Phil Kessel. He's having quite the year, too. 33 goals for him. He's really establishing himself as one of the upper elite players in this league right now.
Yeah, and it's funny. If you watch him play, boy, he's exciting. To see him when he gets the puck or find those little areas where he can shoot the puck, he's fun to watch. The Jackets will definitely be paying attention to that line tonight.
All right, should we bring Jeff in yet, or should we make him wait even?
Take a little look at him.
All right, let's see. Let's see if he's ready.
Yeah, he's getting bitter back there. Yeah, let's bring him in.
All right, Jeffrey. Oh, now he's getting a text. Right at the time we're ready to bring him in. Yeah, he's probably getting hot off the rumor mill.
Just give him the mic. See what he has to say.
All right, Jeff.
I'm sorry, guys. I've got to go do a television interview, so I'm unavailable to you here.
Well, TV rules all. We know that. Jeff, this Maple Leafs team, as we were talking about, they have one of the wild card spots right now, and this is a franchise that expects to be in the playoffs at the end of the year, and I think if they weren't in the playoffs, it's going to be not only serious disappointment, but serious upheaval here.
Well, this is, after all, the center of the hockey universe, and the Leafs are expected to win the Stanley Cup every year. Many times they don't make the playoffs, and many times if they do, they go out early, as they did against Boston, despite leading in that series. As you know, Nathan Horton had a big series. In fact, scored 4 goals. I think picked up 7 points in the 7-game series. And from that point on, Boston went all the way to the Stanley Cup final before being sidelined by the Chicago Blackhawks. And they kind of spit the bit later on in that series and allowed Chicago to win their second Stanley Cup. And, of course, there's a guy that just left the ice here, Dave Bolland, who scored the Stanley Cup game-winning goal. He's not close to returning. I got to think the Leafs are going to come here with a little snarl tonight. Number one, they've lost the last 2 games in overtime. The Blue Jackets beat them in the 2 previous games somewhat handedly, including a 6-0 shutout victory here at the Air Canada Centre. So I'm sure that Randy Carlyle, who surprisingly didn't have the guys on the ice today after a 7th straight day in practice yesterday at Ricoh Centre, their practice facility, gave them the morning off. They're going to come here with a little chip on their shoulder tonight, and the Jackets better be ready to play. Plain and simple, as Jody alluded to, and boy, Jody certainly knows. I salute him for his insight each and every day. And the fact is, the Blue Jackets did not play well enough, I thought, against Florida, a team that, quite frankly, is on the outside again, looking in as far as the postseason is concerned. So the Jackets are going to have to come with a much better game. Hopefully their A game here tonight. And the players know this is going to be a big, big stretch here, starting today and going home to play Dallas. Fortunately, Dallas is playing at home tonight against Buffalo, so the Jackets get a break. But if you think ahead to next week, when the Jackets conclude their road trip in Dallas, they've come home to face a Detroit team that is rested. So, hey, this is a big week for the Blue Jackets. I still haven't seen this team, and at this point, I'm a little disappointed with the Olympic break because we were firing on all cylinders prior to the Olympic break. Bobrovsky was on top of his game. We haven't seen flashes of his brilliance prior to the Olympic break. The line of Horton, Johansson, and Jenner had their A game going. We haven't seen much from them, at least to the level that they were playing prior to the break. The Dubinsky line, we've seen a little bit of a minor shuffle there. Calvert moved down to the 4th line. Cam Atkinson's got to certainly step up his game. I didn't think he had really a good game the other night despite the goal. So there's lots of room for improvement. The Blue Jackets, in a lot of people's opinion, are the second best team in the Metropolitan Division, and I think now we want to see them prove it starting here tonight against the Toronto Hockey Club.
You talk about a snarl. It sounds like you have a little snarl on there, Jeffrey, and I like it because it is that time of year. Everybody goes through the process of the regular season, and you talk about the break. Interesting enough, I think the break will pay off for this team. I think that there's a little bit of a lull. There's a dip in their game. Sure, I wish they would have won the first game, but there's going to be more lessons for this team. There's going to be more disappointments, and there's going to be heartbreak in some games. But how they deal with it and how they react, I definitely agree with you on the first 2 games. I look for a big upshoot here starting tonight in Toronto, where it just seems like the attention level is at a real high here for players.
And you're right, I have a little bit of a snarl here today because my good friend here and colleague, Bob McElligott, starts by taking a shot to 7 hometowns. Well, the fact of the matter is I grew up here in Toronto until I was 14. My dad passed away, my mom remarried, and we moved to Calgary. And then, of course, it was a succession of other cities. And, hey, I'm proud to say that I was born in this great city. And also Todd Chirac. I'm going to take a shot at him as well because he was down taking pictures of the Toronto Maple Leafs back in the 30s and was wondering if that was my first broadcast year. Well, you know what? I wish I did broadcast in the 30s. And you know what? I'll broadcast for another 20 years. And, Todd Chirac can take all the pictures that he wants here. Hey, there's a lot of history. There's a lot of tradition here. And it's great coming back to Toronto, the center of the hockey universe.
Snarl.
I wish I was broadcasting back in the 30s, too, because everybody listened to radio back then. It would have been perfect. I'm past my prime, or past the prime of radio, perhaps at some times. But I'll go ahead.
No, you were ahead of your time. Unlike you, I'll give you a little compliment there. You were ahead of your time.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. A better man than me. Hey, let's talk real quickly about the Matt Calvert. You talked about Matt Calvert coming down and playing with Derek McKenzie and Mark Letestu. I think that's obviously it's a no-brainer move, but it makes his team better. I really thought – I understand why Todd Richards was putting Marian Gaborik on that 4th line when he first came back to get him acclimated to the game speed again. But I thought in New Jersey, when the Blue Jackets needed that response of the 4th line physically, they didn't have it. And I thought that was much more apparent. As you said, he started that line the other day. And Matt Calvert, to me, and you guys tell me if you disagree, but to me, on a good team, Matt Calvert is probably playing that third line, fourth line role as more of a checking guy and less of a scoring guy.
Yeah, and I look at him here definitely as a complimentary player, and for him to he realizes his role no matter what, and for those guys to start the other night and do it to a T, it just those guys, that's a leadership role for those three guys. They're not going to be a liability. They're going to do things right, and it's easy in games to get away from that. And I love that the 2:00 game you start that way. I used to love when we were in Syracuse. We try to start with a brawl, and it's just hey. You can field out that game till the third period, and those afternoon games. The other teams, what direction are we going to go here? Are we going to fight? Is this going to be rough? Well, guess what? These guys went out and they started banging with authority, and I think that got them the win.
Jeff, who do you see being a factor here tonight for the Blue Jackets? Any guys that you think this might be one of the nights they step up and shine?
Well, I'm hoping that, as I mentioned earlier, that we see a little more from the Johansson line with Boone Jenner, who will have a number of friends and family in attendance here, and Nathan Horton, who is from Southern Ontario as well, and I'm sure he'll have some friends and family in attendance as well. So that's got to be the line that takes charge here. Now, Johansson's had some success against Toronto in this series. In fact, played one of his best games here early on in the season against Toronto, and certainly played well in that return engagement in Columbus, just south of us here. So, that's the line that's got to take charge. That's the line that the Blue Jackets are going to count on here through this stretch. And I'm looking for a little more from those guys in particular.
Sergei Bobrovsky will be back on tonight. I think that those effects from Russia, I spoke with Anisimov about it and Nikitin, and they mentioned that the third period of the first game in Newark, done. It hit them. And for me, Bob, the first two games back, he just hasn't looked that quick. Sharpness isn't there. So for me, in Toronto tonight, he's been back a good amount of time now. The angles, I don't know. I'm sure he's had some more than enough time to get acclimated with that. I think that is the player that we're going to see a lot from starting tonight. Yeah, your fingers in the air.
I'll give you a compliment. You're the one that suggested coming back from Russia and Sochi that, in fact, that would be somewhat of a detriment getting back here. And I'd be interested. I know you had dinner last night with Van Riemsdyk, and I think that Anisimov, Nikitin, who has been the steadiest of the three Russians that have played, unfortunately, Fedor Tutin's out of the lineup. I think he's been the steadiest, but Artem Anisimov, the last couple of games, has really stepped up his game. And I think part of that is the fact that they've got acclimatized here to the Eastern time zone after being over in Russia. And I think, and I'd be interested hearing if Van Riemsdyk talked about adjusting back to an Eastern time zone after playing in Sochi. I'm telling you what, I think it had an effect on our players.
Yeah, they're still adjusting. And Van Riemsdyk brought that up. He's like, yeah, it's. I mean, you think you're back. It's like anything. You think you're back. You think you feel great. But until you really do, you're like, wow, I really didn't feel good last week.
Yeah, that's how I was in the second period on Saturday afternoon. I thought I was back. I never thought I was great. You guys mentioned Anisimov. I think he could be a big factor. If he plays more games than not the rest of the year, like he played the other day against the Florida Panthers, major factor that nobody's even thinking about right now. So that would be great.
I agree with you, and I think the fact that he and Nikitin were selected, and let's be honest about it, they were somewhat surprises to be named to Team Russia for the Olympic Games, and I think that has been a boost to their persona, and I think it'll pay off for the Blue Jackets here down the stretch. I'm surprised. Here we are, and the inside edge has gone several minutes here now. You guys haven't brought up, hey, have you heard anything in the rumor mill here? After all, we're in the center of the hockey universe. You guys.
There's nothing going on.
How can you say that? There's a lot going on. Nothing has been finalized yet. There was a minor trade, I emphasize, made yesterday. But I think there will be a great deal of activity, and I think that we've already seen the first salvo thrown, obviously the Buffalo trade. But I suspect there will be several names talked about here in the next 24, 48 hours when we get to Wednesday. And I think it's great. There'll be a live broadcast of the Inside Edge from Chicago. And I know you guys are going to be all over it. And I'll tell you what, I suspect Wednesday will be a very, very busy day. And I think kudos to you two and the Blue Jackets for making that show live on 97.1 The Fan at 7 o'clock. In fact, just to show how dedicated you guys are, I understand you're not going to fly with the team and are going to make your way to Chicago early. I think that's terrific. And I look forward to listening to the show and maybe even being part of it if I'm invited.
Well, of course you're going to get invited. So see how he worked that? He gave us the pre-promote, and then he worked the own invitation. I love it. I love how he did that. We're actually going to subtitle that show "Couple of Windbags in the Windy City." That's what we'll do on Wednesday evening. But again, lots of hockey this week. As Jeff said, you've got this game tonight. It'll be a 7 o'clock start here. Jeff and Jody will be on Fox Sports Ohio. I'll be on the Blue Jackets Radio Network tomorrow night, right back at home to take on the Dallas Stars, and then off to Chicago for that show live at 7 o'clock on Wednesday night. Trade deadline in Chicago Thursday, in Nashville Saturday, and in Dallas next Monday. That'll do it for this morning's Inside Edge. For Jody, Shelley, and Jeff Rimmer, I'm Bob McElligott.
You've been listening to the morning skate edition of the Inside Edge. Come back every game day to get the breakdown from Bob McElligott and Jody Shelley.